Damn, that's a cozy little scene. And in fact this is a cozy little game, because it's Phantasy Star. Or in fact it's the PS2 remake of Phantasy Star. It was part of that whole Sega 2500 series, and it was Japan only until fairly recently, but thanks to the team at Phantasy Star Cave we now have the whole thing translated and localised, and I will drop a link to that patch in the video description. Let's get into it. The original Phantasy Star 1 on the Sega Master System is my favourite RPG of all time, and it's a pretty legendary one. It was a very early example of a big JRPG, releasing around the same time as the first Final Fantasy and the first Dragon Quest game, and it had a really good team behind it, most notably Yuji Naka, who obviously wanted to do Sonic, and Reiko Kodama, who wanted to do a ton more cool stuff, but I always associate her with Skies of Arcadia. But today we are talking about the updated version. This remake really keeps to the vibe and the style of the original, and just adds a little bit by way of updated visuals and some extra party chat and dialogue. But let's meet our heroes and find out what they're all about before we go on our quest. To avoid any confusion, the names in this patch are a little bit different because they're closer to the original Japanese intent. So in the original game we had Alice, Meow, Odin and Noah. Now we have Alyssa, Meow, Tyrone and Lutz. So all of the human names are fairly different. This game starts out exactly the same as the original, with Nero, Alyssa's brother, being killed by the evil King Lashik. There's some whole to do about the planet Palma being put under horrible tyrannical rule and this evil empire being in charge, but it's still pretty cozy. Nonetheless, Alyssa is not too pleased that her brother's been vaporised and so sets out to avenge his death, restore peace to the kingdom, yada yada yada. JRPG type beats. But when we take control of the gameplay, that's when the magic really starts to happen. We step outside of Alyssa's house and straight away we're in this little cozy as fuck Dragon Ball Z looking town with the capsule houses. Straight away as soon as we get outside we get hit with the soundtrack, and it's just great. The soundtrack in all of the towns and even in some of the dungeons has this really sort of jaunty, relaxing vibe to it. Very positive, very chill. So we start the game off with Alyssa wandering around the town chatting to folks and trying to find out what we're meant to be doing. Along the way we're going to get into random battles, leveling up, get strange esoteric prompts from NPCs that further the quest, and meet party members and just generally do JRPG stuff. The game takes place across 3 different planets and they've all got their own biome. You travel between them with a spaceship. For such an early JRPG, this had a lot of really good traversal options. You also had a Land Rover and a cool little submarine boat thing to go around water on. But the bulk of what we're going to be doing in this game is going into dungeons. I love the way these are handled because you go into a first person dungeon crawler mode. Now I can't speak Phantasy Star 2 and 3 because I haven't played them, but by the time 4 came along they dropped this whole mechanic, but I really like it. It gives this very claustrophobic maze-like feel, and the idea is that you kind of map the dungeon out on paper as you go in, very old school D&D type stuff. Of course you do get some helpful items, you can get flashlights to light up dark dungeons, and you can get atlases so that the characters will map out the steps as they go along. But a lot of these things have multiple flaws, including traps and pitfalls, and it can all get a bit crazy trying to keep it straight. The first major one of these you'll do will be to rescue Tyrone, or Odin as he was known in the original. Early on in the game you rescue this cute little creature called Meow who kinda looks like a cat but doesn't like being called a cat. That's something that you find out more in this port. In the original he's not very talkative, whereas in this version he's very sassy and has a lot more dialogue, and often tells people not to call him a cat. But anyway, he's best friends with Tyrone, aka Odin, who's been turned to stone by Medusa, so we have to go into this cave, find him, and turn him back to himself. So he joins up. Big Chad. Later on we pick up Lutz the Esper and the gang's all here. And then really it's just all about chilling and vibing. This comfy place. Talking to this dude. But a decent amount of grinding as well. Now, random encounters, grinding, leveling up, all that kind of stuff is a bit of a bugbear for me. I find it annoying when RPGs do it too much, but for some reason I don't mind it here. I think one of the things is that the battles tend to go by fairly quickly, and even though the battle system is fairly simple, I do like that there's quite a tactical element to it. Sometimes when JRPGs have random encounters, I tend to just button bash through them, just attack until the enemy's dead and then heal the characters if I need to, and get really bored with it really quick. Phantasy Star's pretty well balanced and well paced in that way. If you go back to the early parts of the game with your full party, you will absolutely wipe the floor with everything. But when you're first starting out, even just a basic fly is a challenge. You'll find yourself back into the hospital, healing up, restocking in the shop and going out for another run. It actually has a very satisfying flow to it. You do feel like this very sheltered person who's never really had to fight very much and getting their first experience of it and building up. But then by the time you got a few dungeons under your belt and leveled up your weapons a little bit, you start to feel like a real badass. And although the classes of your party are fairly standard, so Lutz being sort of a healer type, whereas Tyrone's a big tank, there is still a good amount of strategy in there. For instance, Tyrone's really strong, but he can also use guns. If you give him an axe, he'll do a hell of a lot of damage to one enemy, but if you give him a gun, he'll do a smaller amount of damage to everything on the screen, which when you're outnumbered can be really helpful. Meow is not that powerful, but he can heal and he can also buff your other characters. Lutz is a healer as well, but then he's also a very powerful mage, so you've got to balance his magic meter and think, do you want to use it to heal your party or cast powerful spells? None of this is revolutionary by any means, but just the way it all flows together and the way the battles go by fairly quickly, it just feels nice and balanced. I think one of the things is that the battles tend to go by fairly quickly, and I really like the way that it's all animated. In the original Phantasy Star, you didn't see your character, you were just kind of looking out of their eyes, and there was only one enemy on screen, no matter how many enemies there actually were. So it was more just kind of a still image with text telling you what was going on. Whereas now we see our full party rallied up against the enemy with a nice big landscape stretching off into the background. All the enemies have nice cool animations, so do our party, everything looks really lush. The more high-res models look really nice here, and I'm glad that they decided to stick with pixel art for the characters. Even though there is 3D polygonal stuff going on in the world with some of the assets like the water, all of the characters have that classic sort of 2D sprite based look. At the end of the game, this remake tells us something like, this is only the beginning, and then Sega did go on to make Phantasy Star Generation 2, which is a remake of the second one, but they never got around to doing 3 or 4, which is a shame because I would have loved to see them reimagined in this style. And Sega are on a hot streak at the minute, bringing back a lot of beloved franchises from yesteryear. I honestly think something like this would sell like hotcakes. I don't have much else to say about this game other than I heartily recommend it. Even if you're not a big RPG fan, I feel like you owe it to yourself to try this one. The Master System game is surprisingly accessible for a game of that time, but this remake really does help, especially obviously with the English patch now. There's a lot more text, so the clues and the directions are a little bit less esoteric, and you generally have a clear idea on where you're going. You can hit party chat anytime, sometimes just for colour commentary and sometimes to help you on your way. But you got a likeable gang, you got a cool art style, you got 3 planets of some of the coziest towns you've ever seen, and you got one of the most banging chill soundtracks you're ever going to hear. What more could you want? As always folks, I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please hit all those buttons, let me know, and I will see you in the next one.